Good morning, Beth.
Hi there.
How are you? So it's morning here, and people don't realize, well, they don't think probably about the fact that we record these at a different time than when we launch them. So it's a beautiful morning here in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am Megan Holmes for those people who have just started watching. And together with my friend Melissa McLeod, who owns the Wool and the Floss in outside of Detroit, Grosse Pointe, we have put together this podcast that, believe it or not, people are watching. Pointing It Out podcast here on YouTube. So if you're watching, you've already found it. So again, I'm Megan Holmes. I am STL Needlepoint. People have asked me to say that because I'm the Needlepoint Clubhouse, but I am STL Needlepoint on social media. And I am delighted to have my pal Beth here. So Beth, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, hi. So I'm Beth Nagle, and I'm coming to you from southern Vermont, where it's also beautiful and pretty blue sky, but we still have a fair amount of snow on the ground.
Oh, bummer.
And so I'm a needlepoint designer and the owner and designer of Doolittle Stitchery.
Very good. So Beth, it looks like you're actually sitting in what I would call your studio. Is that right?
I am in my studio. I have a fairly consistent fine art painting practice.
Wow.
So I do both in this room. I have do little needlepoint things, and then I paint mostly large abstract paintings.
Wow. So maybe we can get to that in a minute because I'm fascinated by that piece. But so first of all, I want to say, so you say Southern Vermont. I don't exactly know where that is, but if I recall, you're kind of in that little needlepoint sort of hotbed with your friends, Pip and Rue are there.
Oh
So
yeah, Tara is a friend of mine, Tara of Pip and Rue. Her
right.
and husband Willie we belong to a little field club here, and they also belong there. Tara and I play tennis and golf and do all kinds of things together. And then Trisha Heaton
Yes.
is also she's actually moved recently, but she's from this area as well.
But she came up, raised kids in that area. So Brooke,
Here, yeah.
as we know, Brooke was there, and your daughter Tess, and so you've kind of got this like little like, I don't know, I'm calling it the Vermont hotbed of needlepoint.
Yeah, and there's two needlepoint shops in this little, like, pretty close, 2 towns apart. So
that's awesome. What is the
yeah.
town, Beth?
So I'm in Dorset.
Okay.
But it's near Manchester would be the place that people would know, and it's near Stratton Mountain.
Cool. Well, I've never been to that part of the country, but since it's so needlepoint heavy, I should probably get there. Yeah. So Beth, I know some about your sort of needlepoint background, but let's start with sort of how did you get into the craft to begin with? How long have you been actually stitching?
So I actually stitching probably, my mom always stitched. I was always the kid who wanted, whatever, if she was making something, I wanted to know how to make it. And
sure.
So I'm sure I picked it up. I always loved like those the loom that you made the pot holders out of. And
my daughter's doing that now. Yes, I love
and the thing that had the tail come down where the little doll, and always had all that stuff. So, but in terms of needle
for a long time.
Yeah, I always like to draw and do all of that. So I'm one of 5, and we moved to England. My mother's English, which has nothing to do with it, why we moved there, but we did. My father was transferred there when I was 12. And when we lived in England, I got my first job working, and I was racking my brain to see if I could remember. I was putting there was like a recipe card, and I would make the yarn packets for these kits.
Oh, okay.
Which now I think they were Joan Walsh England kits, who I think was American. And they were like these little people, boys and girls, they had big heads, big eyes. And so anyway, the kits were screen printed, and my job was to make these the packets of the yarn.
You would kind of like wind the little yarn pieces together and put it in with the kit.
It was more like there would be a giant table, and this recipe card would say 5 black, 3 red.
Oh,
you lay them out, and then we
yeah.
knot them up and put them in the kit.
Got it. How cool.
Yeah.
So you did that. So did you know how to needlepoint at that time, or were you just
Yeah,
like,
I think I did know how to needlepoint. Yeah.
okay. All right. So
And so
then,
I don't know when I transitioned to painting needlepoint, but I did paint needlepoint through college.
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember what any of your first kind of pieces were, the canvases?
So I painted for a lot of people. When we went to England, the sort of rule or plan was when you turned 18, you would come back to the States and go to college. So when it became my turn, I was in England, no one knew anything about American colleges. So, my dad gave me the college book and picked 3 schools. Yeah, pick 3. So I picked Rollins in Florida, no idea why. Bard College. Bard for some reason jumped out at me, and Yale because my father went there. I didn't get into Yale, but I got into Bard and Rollins, and I chose Bard. So I left England and came to Bard.
And what city is that in?
It's in New York, so it's like Rhinebeck, New York. And it was a very artsy, sort of out there school at that time. It was a great school. But I stayed there 2 years, and I transferred to the San Francisco Art Institute.
Cool.
And at that point, I remember that I painted needlepoint at that point because I painted for Dee Dee Ogden. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yeah, Dee Dee Designs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And how
did
you meet her?
It's telling me I can't really remember, but I obviously knew how to paint.
Sure.
That I had learned from somebody else prior to that, and because it was such a unique skill. I always knew anywhere I went, I could find a job.
How interesting. And so needlepoint, was that sort of prominent in like?
Yeah. So she lived in California.
Uh-huh.
And I looked her up, however you looked people up back then.
Sure, the yellow pages, maybe.
I'm sure that's what it was. And found her, and I worked for her for years. And she taught me a lot. She was rough. She was a real perfectionist. And I don't know why I stuck with it, because I think I made like 25 cents an hour or something ridiculous. But I knew I loved. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, were you reproducing her artwork or her needlepoint design, and then you were just reproducing?
Yeah. So she would give me a tracing, a black and white tracing on tracing paper, a model that was fully painted, and a stack of canvases. And I would take them and draw them all on with a Sharpie, and then fill them in with the paint, and then take them back and sit there, and she would go through them and send me home with about half of them.
Like, 5 of these are good. The other 16 need to be redone.
60, and here's your $5.
Oh, wow. Isn't that amazing?
But I knew enough that the painting is hard. It is hard to learn.
Yes.
And some people can't, it's visionary too. You have
it's visionary. It's on a grid. It's getting the right consistency of the paint. There's a lot to it. And that's why these canvases are not inexpensive, because it's really an art.
Even for me, painting for however many years, it's 30 plus years, still takes me an hour to paint a 4-inch round.
Wow.
So you really do appreciate.
So you started doing these kits, then you were painting for Dee Dee.
For Dee Dee. And then I stayed then I moved to Los Angeles. And again, I probably went through the yellow pages, and I found this company that was making these. They were little canvases, probably like 3 inches round. Again, they were kits, and they were small little hand painted, like they had like maybe a bell or an ivy leaf, something very simple. They were mostly Christmas.
Okay.
And then they came in this kit with a half of a styrofoam ball and a red plastic ring. I think they were called stitchets.
Oh, how funny. So you was like a self-finishing
Yeah.
deal. Cute.
Yeah.
So you
And
painted
so
those,
I
or
would paint those for,
did you design them, or you just
I
recreate?
probably started doing some designing then.
So then is that sort of when your design flair
No,
started?
no. So then I worked for, I sort of left Los Angeles. I came back to New York. I worked for, there was a place in New York called Woolworks. I worked for them for a while. Then I worked for Erica Wilson.
Oh, sure. In
Yeah,
Nantucket, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Erica at that point, I don't know that she had her Nantucket store, but anyway, I worked for her. Then this is sort of fast forwarding, but then I worked for the Silver Needle before. So I worked for this woman named Almy Beauregard who owned it, who I think at one point I spent a summer with her in like Martha's Vineyard or something. So she must have had a satellite store.
So I was wondering if you were going to bring up Silver Needle, because correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just, I think, what I've heard, but many of those designs are yours. Is that right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that was kind of the, again, remember, I'm a little new to this industry, so I don't have the depth of history of knowledge, but so that was kind of the first travel round. Those were kind of the first.
Yeah, they probably were. So so I worked for Almy, who owned it first, and Almy sold it to Joyce Pandolfi and Sue Ellen Ward, who owned it for quite a while, but it was just a retail store.
Okay.
So I did a lot of custom work for them, a lot of copy work. Then Joyce worked really hard at getting that Beatrix Potter licensing. So I sort of helped them through that by, again, that was like really tedious. We would paint the model and then we would send it to whoever the licensing, and then they would send it back and say, this green is too yellow.
Oh my God.
And we fixed, I mean, they were really, really picky, which is why, and it's unfortunate they're not making those anymore, but that's why those were so good.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know kind of how that happened over the year, because you're going back.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So they carried the licensing for a while. Then once she went wholesale, she got Hello Moon and did all those other.
Yeah.
So I continued to work for her for a while. Then she sold the business to, and this is after she'd gone wholesale. She sold it to a woman named Janet and her daughter, who actually had a shop in Greenwich, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sold it to Colonial.
Yeah.
So in terms of the travel rounds, there was a woman working there who started the countries. The countries had been started. And then I started the states.
And that was kind of your idea, your brainchild? And
yeah, so the whole sort of, there was a formula that I kind of came up with for them, which was, it would have the shape of the state, the bird, the flower. Yeah. But so you can kind of see how that formula fed into my my ski rounds.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. So and that's what I was kind of hoping we were teasing out here is, so you kind of did some of that designing. And my guess is that those are, and I don't know all the legality, but my guess is that they sort of now own those designs, but you still had kind of that idea. And so then you eventually start your own business and you're like, wait, there's kind of a gap in this places and traveling things. And so you said to yourself, I'm going to do these. So because for those people who are familiar with your line, you've got some vacation destinations, you've got some lake things, you've got some ski resort things. So kind of what was the beginning of all that?
So that had been percolating for a while with me. And I again, like I sort of work I like to have sort of parameters of how it's going to play out, because it's not, sometimes I feel like everybody puts every thought they have on a needlepoint canvas, and I didn't want to get into that. I didn't want to have like this giant line that didn't hold together.
Sure.
So I was really focusing on the ski resorts. Just to go back a bit, I also did the Adirondack line that the Silver Needle has. I don't know if you would be familiar with it because it's not something you would necessarily buy.
I'm trying to picture it, but yeah, that's
Got
unfortunate.
the moose, there's a moose and there's some patterns and
Oh, so kind of the Fair Isle,
yeah,
like this sweater look. Yeah, yeah. I know what you're
yeah.
talking about. Absolutely.
So again, that was a very solid line, you know, it didn't deviate from its sort of look. So I knew I wanted to do that.
Mhm.
And then I moved to Vermont and it was in 2014 and I have paperwork that shows I was kind of working on it for years, but it just kind of gelled all of a sudden. I was like, oh, I know how to do this.
Yeah. So the ski resorts are absolutely darling. I wish I could tell you that I was a skier and that I was stitching those.
I don't even ski. That's the funny part.
And I was like, anytime people are like, we're going on our ski vacation, I'm like, oh, good for you. I'll be sitting and drinking coffee by the lodge fire, you know. But anyway, I think they're absolutely adorable.
Thank you.
So you've got that line. And then what resonates kind of with me being a Midwesterner is the lake concept. So we
Yeah.
have a line here at the shop. We sell the Lake of the Ozarks, and you've got a lot of your, and those are adorable. And that resonates more with me.
Yeah,
but
I like the lakes too. They're newer, and I also was on Lake Champlain, and I've been thinking about lakes, and I was at someone's cabin, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay.
And people really like, whether your lake is huge or small, like if there's enough people, like they kind of like are like, that's our lake, you know, like people really kind of like own their whatever lake there, whether it's Lake Michigan or whatever. But anyway,
Whether it's good or bad, I tend to I sort of like the idea of making things for people that they can't find elsewhere.
Well,
And
and you're doing a great job of that. Yeah, for
it's
sure.
probably not the best business model. But
Well, I think you're doing a great job. And then, so then you've also got the kind of, I would call it, because I'm again a Midwesterner and I'm maybe not as sophisticated as some, I would call it sort of the exotic travel location,
Yeah.
the Maldives and the, I'm trying to think of some of the others that you've got.
Well, the funny thing about those is, so some of those, Maldives I made because Betty Scanlon, who owns Stitch by Stitch in Larchmont, who I knew because I worked at the store that she sort of bought. Well, she wanted one because her daughter got married there. So I was like, okay, I'll make it for you. And then that's why we have it. But some of those world ones are actually left over from Silver Needle that they never either got approved or they weren't ready to put them out or whatever. So
but again, I love how you kind of, all of your travel or all of your kind of place things, as you just said, and I think it's interesting, have kind of what you just called the kind of the prescribed look or whatever. So there's kind of like a center kind of focal point, and then you've got your, you know, the place on the bottom, and it's neat because I think so a lot of people are doing these travel trees and things, and it's kind of fun that they all kind of gel together, the places. So I love that about those.
Yeah, and there are other people doing great travel rounds, and they're all different.
Well, that's what I love. I think, you know, we get a lot of mothers, grandmothers, aunts kind of trying to do an annual ornament for, say, like I said, nieces, nephew, whoever. And it's like, oh, well, that's a great idea. They just traveled to, now it's not working so well this year, exactly. But,
right.
You know, so-and-so studied abroad in Budapest or, you know, whatever it is. And so it's a great kind of personal, you know,
memento.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love those. Now, I don't know how these guys came about that I'm sitting right behind, but I
oh, the Zodiac. Yeah.
I love the Zodiac canvases, and I don't think they're showing very well here, but you know, I'm a pretty like grounded Midwestern girl, but for whatever reason, I have always really identified with my sign. And so when I saw these come out, so I'm a Taurus, and I mean, these are just so much fun. And ironically, we have these here in the shop. We're doing a little trunk show for you. So if anyone's looking for them, we have them. But how did you kind of come about with the look of these and things? Have you done some research or what?
Well, again, so I had this folder that was lying around forever, and yeah, I'll show you in a minute where that came from. So since 2000, I had printouts from my computer since 2000 of trying to I wanted to do this Zodiac line, and I didn't want it to be I didn't know what I wanted it to be. I didn't know what I wanted the look to be. And so eventually, I don't know, all of a sudden I just sort of really sat down with it again and really thought it through. And it turns out that it's probably the first time I've really sort of merged my art and my needlepoint. I don't paint things like this, but I worked this on a painting.
Oh, wow.
So that's
Oh, I
basically
love that.
that's how they started.
Oh my gosh. What's interesting about your studio art is that it's a little more abstract. So
Yeah, much
and
more.
translating that to needlepoint is difficult because if it's
Yeah.
too painterly, then it's not fun to stitch. Wow, those are beautiful.
So that's sort of how so the big ones came first, which is sort of funny.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, and then I know enough how to transfer it onto canvas and cleaned it up and
Sure. And that's a good way to say it. You have to clean up the lines and
Yeah.
otherwise, especially for newer stitchers, it's not as much fun to stitch if it's not exactly stitch painted. That
right.
kind of
Right.
it's hard to do. So, and I'm also hearing you say and listening to you've also created sort of a prescribed way about these. So you've got the flower and the sign and the symbol and the name. It's so interesting to hear you talk about that process.
What I did with those was on all of them, I looked up, so every sign has like a color.
Oh, really?
I'll show you quickly if it's okay.
Yeah, please. This is interesting.
So there's like, I mean, whether it's true or not, I don't know who made it up, but they all have like a sort of a color spectrum and looks like this, hold on. And so I wanted to have sort of this parameters again. So here's Pisces. Oh, here's even better. Here's Taurus. That's the color spectrum of Taurus.
So I can't get a great look at that, but are they kind of like, oh, that's so interesting.
And just to show you, so you see the difference.
So it's like
that's Leo.
So it's fiery or watery or brown. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I collected those. I collected that, and then I figured out what their flower was, which that's debatable because sometimes they say it's this and sometimes they say it's that. Sure. And then so I took the color schemes and each flower, and then the little sign.
So there's the sign, like like the guy, but there's also the symbol.
That sign, so the symbol, yeah.
Let me just show you. I wear that around.
Okay, yeah.
Whoopsie, right there. Yeah, isn't that funny?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've worn that for 12 years. Anyway,
oh, wow.
This is not about me. But I do love that I get to interview you, so I get to interject whatever I want to. So yeah. Anyway, but I love this, and I think it's not for everybody. It's a little abstract, and it's a little dreamy, but I love them, and so it resonated with me right away.
Yes, I'm actually stitching them too. I'm going to stitch. So I'm stitching all my kids.
Oh, very good.
Yes, is Taurus. And then I'm going to make like a garland out of them.
Oh, nice. That's a good idea.
Right?
I like that. So it sounds to me like your inspiration kind of comes in waves. Yeah. But it also takes a while for it to kind of like develop for you, which I think is interesting because I do think that there's kind of this new group of designers who are, like you said, it comes into their head and they think, oh, what a cool way to put that on canvas. And I think it's great that there are two different styles, but it's a little, it's very fun to hear the stories and to kind of almost meditate on that when you're stitching, like to hear the story and how you came about. And because this is a very meditative craft.
Absolutely.
And so it kind of sounds like that's almost the way you design them as well. So there's a couple, I've got several other questions for you, but I'm just
going to plug in my computer. 1 sec.
Oh, sure.
It's okay. It's right here. It's dying.
So one thing that I'm curious about is whether you've got another, like a kind of, you heard it here first, like, is there anything that's on the table that you're kind of playing with that you want to
about? Well, yeah, so I'm not done with the zodiacs because they're going to come out as eyeglass cases.
Oh, fun. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so I'm just doing one side, which,
Yeah.
do people like one side? I mean, do people need a back?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think so. I mean, I think some people do and some people don't, but I'm kind of in a spot where I want to stitch so much that I don't really want to have to stitch the back. My finisher,
Yeah, I started to
I was
design,
putting fabric on the back.
I started to design the backs and I was like, oh, I could do a stripe. I could do, but what's the point? You know, so anyway, so those are going to come out. And
I love that idea. That's awesome.
yeah, and then I've got a big rug, a beach rug that people love, but it's big and people really are liking to stitch small things. So I'm going to do a pillow version of that
Awesome.
and
Love
a
that.
few other things like that. But I don't have a big idea right now, but it'll come.
Well, it sounds to me like it takes you some time to, and that's okay because
I have a few
those
that
who
I've been, like I was thinking about amusement parks.
I love that. I
Those
love
Ferris wheels are
that.
sort of great and
I
colors.
can't stand roller coasters, but I have children who are probably coming up to that age where they're going to force me to do that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great call.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions that I love to ask designers, and I'm not sure that they love to answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. So do you have a best seller, like of all of your things? Like what is the thing that you just can't keep in stock?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that, so I looked, and it's sort of interesting. It's not that I can't keep them in stock because there's a lot of things I can't keep in stock
Well,
because I can't decide. You know, like somebody called me yesterday. A store called, and they had a person come in who, you know, all of a sudden wanted 11 lakes, all the same one. That she's stitching for all
her friends.
So here's a lake that I might have only wasn't a big seller, but all of a sudden now there's somebody wants 11. But in terms of numbers, Vale and Aspen
Really? So
Round
okay.
are the biggest sellers, and then
I actually think I have that.
which are, you know, like these.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
That just in terms of numbers, but you know, at any given day, like I said, somebody could want, you know, Snowmass or whatever. And then I have the summer versions. So I don't have one, but Nantucket, which looks similar to this.
I love that. You know, and I also want to point out that needlepoint is expensive, but some designs are more expensive than others. And that has all to do with the complexity of the design. And so will you hold one of those up again? So, you know, some of your designs are a little more than some others that we have on the wall, but look at all that detail that Beth has there.
Yeah.
I mean, with the whale on the top and the wave going across. I mean, there's a lot of fun, and I would not necessarily say that this is a beginner stitch because there's a lot of detail there.
Well, it could be. It's just a lot of switching.
That's right. That's right. And you know, a beginner could start on the bottom, but the open area. But anyway, I just wanted to just sort of point out that there is a lot going on here from a design.
Yeah, and I think I'm really a basket weave person because I'm sort of old school, and I loved needlepoint because I like the whole idea of textiles. I'm sort of blown away by what people are doing with stitches and fibers, and I really just am like amazed at what people can do. But I don't design that way necessarily.
Sure.
I think some designers do. They really know that this is going to be for a stitch guide and for.
Well, some designers are also stitchers and have ideas of stitches before they even, you know, put the pen or the paint on the canvas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's okay. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah, and like I said, this, as long as I've been painting, it takes at least an hour for me to paint one.
Right. Right. So bestseller are the Aspen and Vale. So what's the
and then these are big sellers too. This in terms of not the rounds.
Love that. We have that on our wall right now too, the pink one.
Yeah, this sells a lot. And then this sold quite a bit. This was from our Living Coral challenge. Yes. And I actually made a purse out of it. It's really pretty.
I love that. That's a great with the tassel. It's so good. Yeah. So what doesn't sell very well for you? Do you have any that don't sell well? Because you know
I do, because I do like weird things like mountains that nobody goes to because somebody will ask me. But I have to keep everything in stock because there will be a time where somebody is going to go, I really want Jiminy Peak.
Right. Right. So what about, do you have a favorite? I mean, it's kind of like picking a favorite child, which is not.
Well, I'm very attached to the zodiac right now because they really were a labor of love, and they're not doing that. I mean, they're doing fine, but they're sort of a slow. They're expensive. They're bigger piece. The little ones do great. The little ones
Yep.
I
Well,
do
I
really.
have this in my stack of things to stitch, and maybe I'll come up with a stitch guide, and then maybe we'll be able to sell. But we have them right now, 20% off with our trunk show. So
There you go.
yeah, so hopefully people will give us a call. Well, I love it. I think it's just really cool. But again, it's kind of my thing. So it
Yeah.
stuck to me right away when they came out. So so then so you're kind of I just asked you your favorite. You said that's kind of your thing. So what's your sign?
Pisces.
You're a Pisces, so you're a water girl, right?
Mhm.
Isn't that what the Pisces is?
Yeah.
What is it at?
It's the fish.
Oh yeah, and that's that awesome aqua color, that turquoise.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not showing great on the screen because of the lighting, but this is really beautiful. The lavenders. And that's
Yeah.
so funny because I'm not a purple girl. So like it, I don't know, again, making a connection with my star sign. So is there anything we've kind of covered your history, we've covered, your process.
Well, I think, one thing I don't know if we said that Hello Tess is my daughter.
Of course. I'm not sure if we said on that either a little bit at the beginning, but it is kind of a mother-daughter cool thing. And you know what I love about that is, well, in fact, we also need to get Tess on the podcast too, but
Yeah.
she's just raising that tiny little newbie. So she's
Yeah.
kind of busy right now, but your designs between the two of you are very different. And
Yeah.
that's kind of fascinating to me too. Like what comes out of your brain and what comes out of her brain really translate differently.
Yeah. It's interesting because I tried to get Tess into needlepoint for years, but it was clearly going in and just sort of waiting. And now she just is so passionate about it. And she took to painting like nothing I've ever seen. I mean,
Really?
she's a very good painter.
So did you teach her to stitch and she kind of like was not into that, or were you trying to get her to
I
paint?
think she was sort of struggling at some point, and I was like, why don't you try needle pointing? It'll help you relax. And I think she never thought she would be good at it or like it, she took to that like right away, no problems. And then she's like, why don't you teach me how to paint? And I think we both thought she was going to paint for me.
And then she said, see ya, Mom.
And she just took off. So it's been great to see.
Wow. So I guess I am curious, I didn't ask you, what did you study in school? So you said you went to the San Francisco.
So I have a BFA, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I was a painting major.
So you do have kind of that
Yeah.
basic education background in actual studio painting.
Yeah.
And does Tess too?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think she for years was sort of trying to she always wanted some sort of creative outlet, and she just couldn't find it. And then all of a sudden it clicked.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah.
It's really fun at market to go to, because you two share. I'm not sure how much longer you'll be able to do that because your lines are growing.
Yeah.
But it's always fun at market for us to go visit Beth and Tess together because it's just a really neat. It's just a neat thing. So, and it's special. My mom is a seamstress, and I don't have the patience for sewing. I'm not into it, but we do have now the kind of common bond of having a handcraft, which is cool. But it's even more special that you guys have the same craft in common. So
yeah, it's great. And my other daughter stitches, and so we,
cool.
like fun for us is to like sit and stitch.
My mom and I are trying to find that time together too. It's been tough this year, but I've gotten her.
I'm not a big stitcher either. I mean, I wish I stitched more. I watch your podcasts and all that stuff, and I'm like, oh, I just want to stitch more.
It's finding the time.
Finding
the time is tough right now. For those of us in this industry and anybody who's kind of trying to muscle through this year, but I will say, as you mentioned, that it's very meditative, and it is nice to know that that's kind of what brought Tess to the craft. So
I really think if anybody is struggling in any way and you have any inclination, I highly recommend you take it up, and don't be intimidated by some of the finishing you see. because that's a whole other level. And just sitting and doing basket weave it really, really can help calm you.
Well, I've said it before, and you have alluded to it. I was brought to the craft really out of the whole like kind of old fashioned kind of just the basket weave in the wool and just the tapestry look and the old, and I loved that. And I did basket weave for years and years, and had no interest in anything else. In fact, when I used to come into this shop before I owned it, they're like, "How about some sparkle? How about some silk?" I'm like, "No, I don't need any of that." Wool, great, and they're looking at me like, "You're crazy." And so it's just been recently that I've really gotten more into it, more from an education standpoint and trying to expand my brain. But there's nothing wrong with the basket weave, and especially like you said, when you have a design like yours that have a lot of detail, it's really awesome to see those in basket weave. It lets the design shine. So
Yeah, and sometimes like the Taurus, the square, I've seen people do it with lots of stitches and it looks great, but there's plenty going on that if you just want to sit and relax and basket weave.
yep.
It's
Well, and I think it's
fun.
also a reminder to people that like this does look big, which is probably kind of
And
why
it really isn't.
it's not that big. It's on 13 count. And um, Melissa and I have been talking a lot about this doesn't have to be a sprint to how many pieces you can finish,
You know.
So, the cost in 12 pieces is actually more than the cost of one little bit larger piece that you can experiment with some stitches or some threads or kind of take your time on
And also, I feel like one huge change in the industry has been the finishing. You could put that on a jacket, you could make a bag out of it, there's so many things.
You just gave me an idea. I'm doing some patches on a jean jacket. That would be the perfect piece for the back.
Yeah.
Whoa. All right.
Could be in a tray. I mean, there's so much, the finishing is amazing now.
I know. Finishing is amazing in so many ways, Beth. Let me tell you, it's amazingly hard to get things finished right now and finished quickly. But anyway, so I digress. But it's been really fun to talk to you. Beth, I think about you as really kind of a queen of this industry. You've been in it for a long time, and you're just really a nice person to see and to be around. And we love having you.
It's a great community, and I really love it. I love it. I love everything I do, and I love the people I've met. It's really amazing what's going on.
It is, and I really hope we can get back together this fall. Is what I'm.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. And I know that you're getting excited to go meet that baby girl.
I'm gonna go meet Dorothy. Yeah, in April.
Is that your first grandchild?
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, so I can't wait.
Very good. And maybe there'll be some new inspiration once you see her and feel inspired.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be. I'm looking forward to something new percolating.
Yeah, very good. Well, also is your I went on your website. I didn't dig too deep, but is your studio art on the same site as Doolittle?
No, so I have so on Instagram, it's at Elizabeth Nagle Art.
Okay.
And my website is just elizabethnagle.com.
Well, I think we should check that out too, because it would be really fun to kind of compare the art forms.
Yeah, people are always saying to me, "I can't believe you do those two things." Like, but it's a really nice balance, because this is hard and has no parameters, and that's hard. But the needlepoint is hard too, but it's kind of mathematical and it's factual, and I like it.
It comes a little easier for you, the needlepoint, than the studio art, or can you?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
And so it's fun to push yourself out of that comfort zone sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that piece behind you, and it's just stunning.
Thank you. So
I
have a gallery here that represents me, and that pushes me in that way, and then the needlepoint. So it's great. I have a great life. I'm very lucky.
I think that we all feel, well, at least we were kind of talking before we started this, and just to say we're lucky to be in a world that, like a career world that allows us to do something that we really like and feel inspired every day. And so, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think painting needlepoint is very similar to stitching it. It's very meditative, because you're just, you're just sort of counting along.
Yeah,
And that that is very relaxing for me.
very good. That's great. Well, this has been fun.
So fun.
I appreciate your time so much. I know that we're all super busy in this industry right now, so thank you for making time for us. And
Well, thanks for having me.
yeah, and for those people who are watching for the first time, Elizabeth, just Elizabeth Nagle art and Doolittle Stitchery. And you found us here on YouTube. And so we hope that you subscribe so that we can get the word out to more people, because we love this industry and we appreciate people like Beth. And there's a lot to learn, I think, from the designers and from the process. So
I love these podcasts that you're doing too, Megan. I sit here and I'm like bummed out when I've watched them all.
Oh, well, that's so nice to hear. Well, we're trying, it's I think we're trying to do the best we can to help promote this industry, although it seems to be self-promoting because we're drinking from a fire hose right now, but we love it. And I'm just a very curious person, so I love to hear the stories behind the stories. And
yeah, it's great.
So
keep
all right.
doing it. Awesome.
Well, thank you. It's been fun. So, so thank you, Beth. We will, hopefully I'll see you soon, but I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. You know where to find me.
You got it, girl. Okay. Have a
Okay, Megan, take care.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.